15th of October, Rabbi Levitt, Gemora.
I have a medical appointment this morning, so I have to leave.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, let's see. There's Yom Gimel, Yom Daled. Oh, so we're oh yeah. Let's do this. I think we did it on Yom Chamishi, but we'll review it again. Amalei Abaya L'Rabba Lo Tiflug Aleha De'ula Bava Kama Kuf Yud Daled Amid Aleph 114a in Bava Kama. And it's the lower half of the page. Amalei Abaya L'Rabba. First word of the line is Aval. Yadua. It's about 12 lines or so up from the bottom of the page.
A4, left-hand column. 1, 2, third paragraph. The Gemora challenges Rabbah.
Right, and remember what Rabbah said. Rabbah differed with Ula. Ula basically said that the machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan is in a case where we did not hear that the owner was me'ayish over the item that was stolen or thieved away from him. Would have heard that he said "Vayli lechesron kiss," then everybody would have agreed that that would constitute Yeush, and that Yeush constitutes an acquisition in the hand of the Ganav or the Gazlan of the hide. But Rabbah said no. Machlekes between Reb Shimon and Rabbanan is even in a case where we heard that the owner, the original owner, was Miyayish, and he said "Vayli chesed kiss." Even that case also is a machlekes between Reb Shimon and Rabbanan. So now Abaye is coming to challenge Rabbah. Not to argue with Ula. Okay, so let's take a look at this statement of Abaye. Amalei Abaye. Who would you like to read?
All right.
Okay.
I don't think Phil is capable of reading.
I'm driving now.
I know. Very clever. You got yourself out of it. All right, I'll read. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Omale Abaya, Rabba. Abaya said to Rabba, Lo Tifalug Deula. Do not argue with Ula. Isnan Bamata Nisain Kivu say, or we have learned in the Mishnah that the truth is with him. The fish shalo nasayeh ashu alayim. Or Shimon said, etc. says that the case of the hides of a thought does not render them susceptible to tumor, because the owners did not despair of recovery. Tamar Habalim states that the reason is that the owners did not despair, which implies Aval Nisyeshu Habalim Hare Elo Shalo, which implies, but if the owners did despair, the hides would belong to the thief, and his thought would render them susceptible to tumor. I'll just read this bit here, I think. Rabba replies, Omale, he said to Abaya, Anan lefi she'ain yeush livelim masa nisan lo. We learned that the Mishnah is saying, because there is no despair on the part of the owners. They're saying we'll be certain that there's no Yeush.
Yeah. In other words, Abaya's maintaining that he has a proof from what it says in the Mishnah, based upon an inference of what the Mishnah does say. He wants to infer that what the Mishnah is saying is against is in favor of what Ula says and against what Rabbah says. Because Rabbi Shimon says that the makshava of the Ganav will not to be no avail, lefi shelo nisyaishu habaylim, because the Bailim were not meyayish. And so Abaya says, oh, so you see from there, Taima, the lo nisyaishu habaylim, the whole reason why the makshava of the Ganav will be to no avail, according to Reb Shimon, is only because the owner was not meyayish. Habal nisyaishu habaylim hare elu shelo. But if he would be meyayish, so then of course it would belong to the Ganav, because Yeush is Konet. So you see from there, it says Abaye, like Ula says, meaning he's interpreting the Mishnah to mean that when it says that they weren't meyayish, that they did not say Vaili lechesron kiss. But if they would have said it, so then the din would be otherwise. And that's a proof for Ula. And on that, Rebbe just pushes it away very easily. He just says, no, we don't read the words of the Mishnah like that. What does it mean? Because the Bailim was not meyayish. That's exactly what it means. Even if he would have said Vaili lechesron kiss. But the lefisha ein yeush lebailim, because the bailim what he says does not constitute a yeush. That's exactly what the Mishnah is saying. Even if we hear that they said bailim lechesron kis, but there's no yeush to the bailim with that that they said by the kiss, because really, if when the opportunity is going to present themselves, they're gonna try to get this ganav in Besdin and get their thing back. Okay.
So an inference to infer something because something was an inference is not that strong, or it doesn't hold that much water, or what?
Okay, that's a good question. Very good question. We don't mean to say that no inference is worth anything. We mean to say that we see over here that that Rabbah is saying that he could interpret these words in a way that is consistent with his view. Since it doesn't say black and white, so there's such a thing as a strong inference based upon what the words say, and there's such a thing as a inference which is capable of being interpreted in an alternative way. And over here, Rabbi is saying this inference that you have, Abaye, is doesn't necessarily have to be interpreted in the way that you interpret it. You're interpreting it to mean that because they weren't mi'ayesh, meaning because they didn't say vayil l'chesron kiss. But it doesn't say that in the Mishnah. It doesn't say that the makshava of the ganav is to no avail because the owner did not say vayil l'chesron kiss. It says because he wasn't mi'ayesh. So I interpret that, Rabbah says, I interpret that to mean that because there's no yeush that the bailim will have in this instance, and even if he would say vayil l'chesron kiss, even if he would say, "Oi, I lost my thing. It's finished. It's gone." Yeah, it's gone right now, but that doesn't mean that I gave up on it. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to try to get it back by going into Besdin and seeing if I could get that guy to give it back to me, right? So that's the inference. Since it doesn't say it explicitly, the inference, depending upon what the inference is, it could be interpreted in an alternative way. So this inference is very capable of being interpreted in an alternative way. This the Mishnah says because the owner wasn't mi'ayesh, means to say because the owner doesn't generally do yeush in this case, not because he didn't say the words. Maybe he even did say the words. Okay. Now we go further to Tanan. Natlu muchasin hamoroi. I think we did this also. Surprised that I don't have it marked off. Anyway.
According to my marking, we got up to police team.
Yeah. So right. Okay. But in any case, if we're going to start from there, we're not going to know at all what's going on because we don't remember exactly what we did over there 3 days ago. So let's go from Tanan, and we'll understand what it means. Tanan notlo muchasin chamoro. Who wants to read?
114A4, bottom left.
Yes.
The Gemara challenges Rabbah from our Mishnah.
Yes.
Okay, Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah, not lu, mochsin, chamoro, if custom collectors took his donkey, etc., and gave him another donkey, or if a bandit took his garment and gave him another garment, they're his. because it may be assumed that their owners have despaired of retrieving them. Money. Now, who is the Tana of this Mishnah, who assumes that the owner has despaired in the case of a robber, the custom collector, and in the case of the thief, the bandit, Rabbanan Kashioa Gudlon. If you say it is the rabbis, for example, the Tanakama of the Mishnah cited above, who assumes despair only in the case of a thief, then a Mishnah's assumption that a victim of a robber, the customs collector, has despaired is problematic. Rabbi Shimon Kashua Gevor, and if you say it is Rabbi Shimon who assumes despair only in the case of a robber, then a Mishnah's assumption that the victim of a thief, the bandit, has despaired is problematic.
Okay.
And it goes on to say that Gemora provides a
Yeah, it doesn't really explain anything. Why is it that it's problematic? That's what we want to know. Okay. Yeah, that's just a bare translation of the words of the Gemara, right? Okay, so like this. If we take a look in the words of the Mishnah starts off with two cases. The first case is a case of the collectors. They took the donkey of Jew number one, and they gave Jew number one back the donkey of Jew number two. That's the case. That's the first case. The second case is notlu listing as ksuso, that robbers took a garment from Jew number one, benosnu lo ksus acheres, and then they gave back Jew number one a garment that belongs to Jew number two. And the Mishnah says, "Harei elu shelo." In both of these cases, the garment and the donkey that was given back to Jew number whatever it was, I don't remember anymore. Jew number one, he could keep it. Why? Because we can assume that Jew number one, in both of these instances, when it was taken from him by the collector, whether it was taken from him by a robber, he was me'ayesh. So now, the Gemora is bringing up this Mishnah and bringing a question and saying, based upon what we know about Reb Shimon and what we know about Rabbanan, we have a problem, because we don't see that the Mishnah goes according to either one of them. Now the problem is why is it that the Mishnah does not go according to either one of them? All the Gemora says is Mani I Rabbanan Kasha Gazlan. I Rabbi Shimon Kasha Ganav. What does that mean? If we say that, so we have two cases over here. One case, the first case talks about the muksin, and the second case talks about the listing. Now, Rashi, so the question is going to be over here, is how do we categorize this muksin? How do we categorize this collector who's collecting taxes or customs, whatever it is that he's collecting? But what category are we going to put him in? The Gemara is putting him in a category over here. Is he regarded as a robber, or is he regarded as a thief? And it's particularly difficult to understand, because the Mishnah itself, the words in the second case are listim. Listim generally means a robber, like listim mezuyin. Listim mezuyin means an armed robber, but listim means a robber. Now, generally, muchasin should be categorized as a robber. Why? Because he doesn't sneak in the middle of the night and take something from you. He knocks on your door and he says, you owe taxes. And you say, I don't have anything to pay you, sorry. And he says, it's okay, I'll take your donkey over there. Now, would you call that being a thief, or would you call that being a robber? That's called being a robber, right? Assuming that he's not authorized to take it. And that's what we're saying over here. We're talking about the type of a collector who doesn't have authority. Maybe he has no authority officially whatsoever, or even if he does have some type of official authority, but he's taking advantage of the authority that was given to him by the king and going above and beyond the authority that the king gave him. So he's acting in a way of robbery. It's called robbery.
Mm-hmm.
So then the two cases are difficult, because both cases are talking about a robber. So that itself is difficult to understand. Why is the Mishnah telling me two cases about a robber, and is telling me the exact same case? If the robber stole a donkey and he gave back somebody else's donkey, you could keep it. And if the robber took a garment and he gave you back somebody else's garment, so then you could keep it. Why do I need both of those cases? The second case is obvious. There's no difference between a garment and a donkey. So this is where Rashi over here, if you take a look at Rashi, Dibra Maskil Shien Yeush Lebailim, Rashi says 4 words over there, and I think he's referring to the case of the Mishnah. Rashi tells us that the Muchas, he's the Gazlan. He's the one who's categorized as a Gazlan, because there's no way to categorize him as anything else. He's definitely a Gazlan. That's the way he acts. He takes it by force. By force of the fact that he's a collector. So no one stands up to him. He takes what he takes. So he's a Gazlan. But then we have to say that the word in the Mishnah that says listim, which generally means a Gazlan, a robber, we're going to have to say over here, we're not talking about a robber. We're talking about a ganav. Like that, we have 2 cases in the Mishnah. The first case, talking about the collector, Mukasin, he's the one who's categorized as a robber, a Gazlan. And the second case is talking about a ganav. Even though it says listing, but we're going to say, says Rashi, that it's referring to a ganav. Why? Because otherwise the Mishnah is repeating the same din a second time for no reason. So it must be that we're talking about the type of a robber who's not really a robber. He's categorized as a ganav, as a thief.
We're not going to.
Okay.
We're not going to say that he's not saying the same thing twice. Once he's referring to an inanimate object, and the other time he's referring to another kind of object, a live thing. So there can't be a question of what type of object he's taking.
Well, do you think that there would be a difference? Do you think that there would be a difference in the din, whether the animal, whether it was an animal or a garment?
Maybe.
What would be the difference? What would be the difference in the halacha?
Okay,
There's no
difference, but you want us, but if you just stick to say one thing like the garment, then you might say, well, all right, so it doesn't apply to a animal, but this tells you it does.
But you have to have some reason, some logical reason why there would be a difference between whether you steal a garment and whether you steal. What would be the difference?
One's alive and one is inanimate.
That's true, but what difference does that make?
It's a difference of the type of item. Anyway, that's what I thought.
Okay. So what we're doing over here is we're trying to understand what the Gemora's question is. The Gemora's question is Mani. Who is the Tana of this Mishnah? Whose view does the Tana, does Mishnah represent? Does it represent the view of the Rabbanan or represent the view of Reb Shimon? So the Gemora says, if we say it represents the view of the Rabbanan, now we have to remind ourselves, what is the machlokes between the Rabbanan and Reb Shimon? So that requires going back to the other Mishnah in Kalim to review that machlokes. And we see over there, if we take a look at that, it's a few lines up in the Gemora over here. We could say that the machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan was in regard to the case where if we did not hear that the if we did not hear that the Bailim said Vaili lechesron kiss, Kasha Gazlan. Why, in the case of the case of Gazlan is difficult. The case of the Gazlan is referring to the case of the Muchas, the collector. Why, in that case, do we say in the Mishnah that even if we do not know, we did not hear that the owner was Miyayish, he didn't say by the Chesron Kis, nevertheless, we assume that he did so. Why is that not a view that the Rabbanan could subscribe to? Because the Rabbanan said, Shel Gazlan ein makshava mitamason. The Rabbanan held, for whatever reason, in the case of a Gazlan, and we do not know whether the Bailim was Miyayish or not, we will not assume that the Bailim was in fact Miyayish. And therefore, that's why the Rabbanan hold, in the case of Gazlan, that the Ein Makshava Matamasan. The Gazlan has no ability to, with his Makshava, will be to no avail because he is not the owner of the item. Why? Because we did not hear that the Bailim was Miyayish. And if we didn't hear the Bailim was Miyayish, we won't assume it. And we said that was based upon why it is that we won't assume it. That was a discussion amongst Ula and Rabbah. But either way, that's the bottom line. That in a case where we did not hear him being Mi'aish, we won't assume it. So if so that's the question of the Gemora over here. We cannot say, says the Gemora, that the Mishnah is the view of the Rabbanan, because it doesn't accord with the din of the Muchas, which that's what the Gemara means when it says Kasha Gazlan. And in the other case, Rabbi Shimon, if we say alternatively that let's try to say if so, then maybe the Mishnah accords with Rabbi Shimon, meaning let's say both cases accord with Rabbi Shimon, meaning which two cases are we talking about? You have to hold cup over here. Phil's driving. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he could hold cup.
We don't want him to have an accident.
Oh, okay. No, chas v'sholem. Okay, so for anybody who's capable of listening very carefully to what I'm saying over here, including myself, when we say Rabbi Shimon, what's the Gemara doing? The Gemara is saying we got to look at both of these two cases in the Mishnah, meaning we have to look at the case of the Muchas, and we have to look at the case of the Listim, which we're saying is really talking about a case of a Ganav. So then we have two different cases, one of a list, one of a Gazlan, and then one of a Ganav. So we would says over there that in both cases we say that we can the Jew number one can keep the garment. He can keep the animal that was given to him by the tax collector and also by the Ganav. Why? Because the Bailim was Mi'ayish. In other words, we're assuming that the Bailim was Mi'ayish. And so in that, the Gemara says that will be difficult.
They haven't got proof.
That won't make any sense according to Reb Shimon in regard to the case of the Ganav. Why will that make no sense according to Reb Shimon in the case of the Ganav? Because Reb Shimon said Reb Shimon said to Rabbanan, he said Chiluf Advorim. He said the Gazlan is capable of making makshava metamasan, because we'll assume that there was a yeush. But in regard to the Ganav, his makshava is not metamasan, because we will not assume a case of yeush if we don't know that he said violent chesron kiss it all. So if so, that's the Gemara's question over here. Gemara's question is that even though the case of the Gazlan would accord with Reb Shimon, but the case of the Ganav would not accord with Reb Shimon. And therefore, the Mishnah, which lists both cases and says that in both cases, whether it's a case of a Gazlan, whether it's a case of a Ganav, we're going to assume that the Bailim was Mi'ayish when the Ganav or the collector took it away from him. It does not accord not with Rabbanan or with Reb Shimon, because neither one of them can learn both of those cases that we're going to impute a yeush. That's the Gemara's question. Baruch Hashem.
Koyach, Rabbi.
Now, okay.
Once the
Anybody follow?
what?
Yeah, 1 second. I have to give my wife some money. Doesn't have any money.
Oh,
Okay, so give it to me, please. I'll get some on my way back.
Hey, Hatzlacha. Shem Yishmor. Okay, let's see.
Once the victim has accepted the replacement donkey or garment, and it's his, and his original one becomes available, can he take it and swap them back, or he can't take it at all, or what?
Again, the collector is he took the donkey of Jew number 1, and then he gave him back the donkey of Jew number 2.
Right.
So now Jew number 1 is holding the donkey of Jew number 2, which the collector gave him.
Oh, right.
And the Mishnah says that the Jew number 1 is allowed to keep the donkey of Jew number 2. He doesn't need to return it to Jew number 2, because Jew number 2, we assume, even if we do not know, we assume that he was Miyayish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so on that, the Gemora is saying that this Mishnah cannot go either like Rabbanan or Reb Shimon, because according to Rabbanan, we can't learn the case of the Goslin, because according to Rabbanan, the Goslin do not. In the case of the Goslin, we say that the Jew number 2 was not Miyayish, according to Rabbanan. And in the case of the Ganav, it's difficult in Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon says we do not say in the case of a Ganav that the owner was Miyayish when it was taken from him by the Ganav. And our Mishnah here says that in both cases, both in the case of the collector, who we're saying is a Goslin, and in the case of, even though it says listing, we're understanding it means Ganav, that in both cases, Jew number 1 can keep the animal and the garment of Jew number 2, because Jew number 2 was certainly Miyayish. That's the question of the Gemora. And now we're ready to hear tomorrow what the Gemora's answer is going to be. So don't forget anything that I just said. And like that, we'll be able to understand what the Gemora says tomorrow, what the answer is.
Amen.
Welcome home, Phil. Safe and
We do
sound.
know the answer.
Yeah.
Oh,
What?
actually, the Gemora even makes it even more complicated. The Shlema Le'ula.
Typical.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Oh, we're still not through. Okay. All right. We have more work to do. How do you like that?
I love it.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody.
Have
You
a good
too.
day. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Shem
See you
Yishmor
later.
Kol
Safe
Klal
and sound, Phil.
Yisrael.